Welcome on behalf of the 61 plus million Americans with disabilities to our panel and celebration of the 35th anniversary of the ADA. I'm Catherine Schneider, an emerita clinical psychologist. Since I've lived over half of my life before the ADA, I got the privilege of being your MC for this panel. Our panel represents 3 generations of people who have lived with the ADA, and they'll share their impressions of the disability experience. After all the speakers, there will be time for questions and comments and a short reception. Thanks to our ASL interpreter, Ashley, and to our sponsors, McIntyre Library, Services for Students with Disabilities, and the UW-Eau Foundation. It's also Disability Pride Month, where we honor the history, achievements, and diverse experiences of the disability community. Notice on your program, the different colors, stripes for disability on the Disability Pride flag. Red for physical disabilities, gold for neurodiversity, white for invisible disabilities, and blue for psychiatric, and green for sensory disabilities. If you can stay to join us for a reception, there are cookies that follow through with this theme of disability pride. So here's my story, and I'm sticking to it. ADA 35, before, during, and hopes for the future. I was born blind in 1949, so I've lived over half my life before the ADA was passed. I attended public schools before Section 504 and got to ask for my own accommodations. One of the first I remember requesting was to not play volleyball in 4th grade gym class. Go stand in the corner, I was told. Most of the accommodations I got were better than that. Like the geometry teacher who used his wife's sewing tracing wheel to make raised line drawings to try to explain perspective to a blind kid. I learned early to ask nice, persist, and make it seem easy to meet my needs. I learned to have a plan B if my first request didn't work. I also learned to recruit allies. An official from Delta Airlines one time advocated for me to be able to ride on the little feeder plane that went into Alexandria, Louisiana, where I was doing my internship. They didn't want to take live animals on the plane, even if it was a seeing eye dog. But they gave it a try because the man from Delta asked them to. The seeing eye dog did not hijack the plane. In 1990, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, and President Bush signed it into law. The act is a federal civil rights law designed to prevent discrimination and to ensure that individuals with disabilities have equal access to and may participate fully in all aspects of American society. It guarantees equal opportunity in public accommodations, employment, transportation, state and local government services, and telecommunications. This important piece of legislation has raised disability awareness of barriers and challenged perceptions and expectations for people with disabilities. It has empowered many more individuals to live their lives with dignity and choice. When the ADA is mentioned, we often think of ramps, accessible bathrooms, and other physical access needs. Here are some of the ways the ADA has affected my life as a blind person. Standard and service animal laws across the country, and more people know about the laws. App for identifying currency so blind people can tell denominations of US paper currency apart if they have a smartphone. 2 of the New York Times daily games, Wordle and Connections, are doable with a screen reader. Schneider Family Book Awards for children's books with disability content and Schneider Disability Journalism Awards are receiving more entries every year, showing mainstream interest in disability issues is increasing. Checkers or other accessible board games are more widely available. Large print programs at worship services and public events are more common. Print Braille books are sometimes available at public libraries for blind parents and sighted kids, or vice versa, to read together. Voting machines with audio capabilities so that blind people can vote independently are available in every polling place. Local sources of gizmos like the independent living centers and the aging and disability resource centers exist, so newly disabled people can try before they buy. Occasional audio descriptions provided in theaters, on Netflix, and on television. A few audio described movies are available at libraries for checkout. Audio and touch tours of museums are more common. Electronic access for blind people to websites, newspapers, emails, etc., is slowly improving. Occasional Braille menus, bank statements, greeting cards, etc. Audio-enabled ATMs so I can do my own banking. Paratransit. Reasonable accommodations so jobs are accessible. Virtual meetings so I don't have to hunt up a ride to get to every meeting. With all this progress, people often ask, are we done? The short answer is no. With every digital improvement, for example, there's a chance that it will go from accessible to my screen reader to inaccessible. Accessibility takes people monitoring and designing for it continuously. And it takes little personal acts of accessibility, like telling me that there's donuts on the counter or a wet paint sign down the hall. Labeling those pictures in your social media posts so I know what you're excited about. Volunteering for Be My Eyes duty. Advocating with Congress so that vital programs like Bookshare and the National Library Service are not cut. Advocating with the FCC so that broadcasters don't get yet another pass on making weather warnings, like those text crawling at the bottom of the television screen, accessible to the blind. The ADA gives a standard of what one can ask for, but it takes people of goodwill to implement it, and it takes patience, time, energy, and persistence to advocate for needed accommodations. We humans don't change our ways quickly, so all of us need to work together to make changes happen. I remind myself when I get discouraged that every change that I ask for also affects other people. So I should continue to ask, even though it seems like I'm always asking. Onward. Our next speaker is Audrey Nelson. She is the Executive Director of the Brain Injury Association of Wisconsin. And much more is to be said about her in your program. And her speech is entitled, "I'm Still Me."
Thank you, Kathy. I just want to say that I really appreciate the effort that the organizers of this did to kind of restate the history of disability advocacy, not only in this state, but in our state of Wisconsin, which was very much front and center of the movement, but also at this campus. I was an undergrad here, and we've come so far since people with I saw that the first person that attended here was in 1955 who was in a wheelchair, and now we don't see that as abnormal, but it is part of what is normal here. So I just want to say that I kind of I chose this piece because it talks about the experience of brain injury that I don't think everyone understands necessarily. And it talks about how my brain injury impacted me. I'm still me. I was asked to write the following piece as a preface to a chapter on self-awareness after brain injury that was published by the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago. I struggled with what to say because I knew they wanted a survivor's point of view, but I had begun to be concerned about the focus on awareness issues and wanted to explain that yes, awareness after brain injury can be a significant problem, but I had come to know that many times people with brain injury know more than they are able to tell us. I share this now to not only speak to awareness after brain injury, but more of what happened after the accident and how I felt about it. Part of the story. I remember when the fear and doubt began. Some may not sense the enormity of the situation because they will first see the clinical purpose behind what the doctor said, but it was the beginning of the shaking of my soul. This is what happened. I had been in a car accident and hurt in many places. My main concerns were my foot that was in a cast and my hand that was burned and cut up. I had very little awareness about what had happened to my head, even though my head was wrapped in bandages. My neurosurgeon came to see how I was doing. He said, "Hello, my name is Dr. Neurosurgeon. How I didn't put his name in there because some of you might know him actually. How are you doing?" I responded. He then said, "Do you know what day it is?" I responded. I remember being, oops, shoot. Uh-oh. I'm so sorry. There's a big part of it missing. But anyway, I apologize for that. That is my error. Basically, he said, I basically said, I don't remember what the answers to those questions were. What I do remember is that if he was asking me such silly questions, he must think something really bad had happened to me. And I remember feeling that they were keeping a secret from me, that I was now cognitively disabled or mentally retarded or really impaired, because why would he ask me his name 30 seconds after he had just told me what it was? And did he know that he had his name tag on? It was just and I know that it's kind of funny now, but it was awful. I was a college freshman and somebody was asking me what their name was when they were wearing a name tag and they had just told me what it was. Do I remember if I told him back what his name was? No, I don't. But I remember what those questions did to me and to my soul. And ever since then, I probably still wonder if I'm still making the grade and still answering the questions. Then I'll just go on to this other piece that apparently isn't Anyway, I remember being angry at my brother and nearly stabbing his hand with a pair of scissors. I remember swinging at my mother, causing the hot coffee she was holding to hit her in the face. I remember not knowing the person who did those things. It was as though the real Audrey was tied up and had to watch this other person destroy her relationships and smother her ability to understand or to reconcile what had happened. I became an expert at replaying conversations I had had with people and realizing that their puzzled look had been because I wasn't always able to communicate in context what I had really intended. Sometimes I would be talking and find that a thought I was trying to express was missing a few critical words when it came time to actually saying it. Instead of pausing and waiting till I found the right word, I would try to avoid the embarrassment and fill the space with a word that sort of fit. At first, I spontaneously made up words. Then I became better at finding words that were close in sound or meaning. Like one time I said the guts and bolts of the situation. But you might have let that go, like, oh, she's just being cute. But it was really my semantic aphasia at the time. But anyway, relationships became awkward. People didn't know how to talk to me anymore. And although I tried, my efforts to talk to others were often misunderstood. I was told by others in their looks, whispers, and eventually their absence that I was not the same as I used to be. Inside myself, I struggled to know and to find a way to tell them that I was still me. My abilities to even understand why I was perceived differently were limited by fatigue, memory, and delayed thinking. Deep inside, I knew something was different, but at the same time, even deeper, I knew that I was still me. It was that remaining sense of myself that fought through the feelings of despair and reorganized my energy into getting better physically and trying my best to be who I thought I was. And there's another page of that, but it just basically says it's kind of the true for all of us, the people that are there to support us and help us get through the anxiety and the frustrations and the losses and also the wins. That's how we get through this together. So I apologize for that.
Thank you. Aubrey Warner is the Assistant Director of the Center for Writing Excellence and a lecturer in the English department. And her talk is entitled How an Elevator Impacts My Day.
All right, can everybody hear me? Okay, I always want to make sure because sometimes the mask and microphones don't always play very nicely with each other. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see so many people turn out. Like we were talking before, it's summer on campus. We never know what that's going to look like. So very much appreciate that you all took the time out of your day. Yes, I am talking about an elevator and writing about an elevator, as many of us are familiar with elevator challenges on campus. I guess I will put that nicely. But I think this is also really kind of, as I started doing more, really about imposter syndrome, which I know is such a strange thing that never happens in academia. So yeah, when I got the email and the invitation for this event, I was so excited. I was really just thrilled to be part of this, to really find these community spaces on campus. But I just remember the moment I hit send on the acceptance email, this imposter syndrome just like immediately seeped into me, and a lot of it, stemming from internalized ableism. As someone with invisible illnesses and dynamic disabilities, I don't always present what society, quote unquote, thinks disabled people look like. And I know that follows me around, and especially like I can go through periods where I'm using a mobility aid and then I don't for months, maybe years at a time. And that just, that sits with me a lot. And when I think about this event and when I was kind of thinking about it, I found myself kind of going back into those old scripts of I am not disabled enough to be able to speak at such an event. I am not disabled enough to have a right to say anything about disability. At the same time, I know there is an extreme privilege in being able to pass as able-bodied. Not everyone has the privilege to disclose. And we know that disclosure is a risk. I have spent half my life thinking about when to disclose, how to disclose, how much to disclose. But given all of that, like there was something about this that like this imposter syndrome ran so deep, and I was like, well, what's going on here? And I think very much I've embraced being disabled. This is a part of my identity that I love. But at the same time, I have spent a lot of time figuring out how to opt out of accommodations. Finding, pathways and parts of my career and kind of ways of moving through the world that work on my terms. This definitely stems from high school when my disability really manifested and became untenable. And my family, like this was out of love, but I do very clearly remember just how worried they were that if we took a legal approach to accommodations, that I would be discriminated against, that my teachers would resent me. Spoiler alert, they resented me regardless. So, that worked out real well. So like all of this is really to say, it's like, okay, I've been asked to speak on a panel about the ADA, and I cannot think of ways in which I have utilized the ADA. I can definitely think of like ways I've advocated for others and things like that. But also, I think the beauty of something like the ADA is how much it integrates in our society. But then, shortly after this event, the central elevator in Centennial went out. And over the course of the months, I found of like the ways that this really changed the shape of my mornings. Because that elevator is the most direct way to my office. And I apologize in advance tapping on the table in front of the mic. That's rude. So my office is on the second floor, but even on a good day, like, with chronic fatigue, with post-exertion malaise, there are days that stairs can just make my heart race, my brain goes fuzzy, my chest constricts. On a really bad day, I feel like I just spent 5 hours at the gym. And then I'm wearing the mask, so then like trying to go upstairs doesn't help with that either. But that elevator really ensures that I can start my day with minimal struggle. There is another elevator in Centennial, but it is the exact farthest point away from where I park. And so like those mornings became a real series of calculations. I had to think about what is the route that sets me up for better success. Do I walk farther to the elevator, getting a nice flat surface and then kind of rerouting through the Student Success Center to my office? Do I, there's a set of stairs right when I enter Centennial. Do I take those and then kind of use that walk to my office to like kind of cool down, so to speak? And that factored into, okay, where do I park in Hibbard? Like, what do I schedule in the morning? How do I dress? Like, how much do I carry in my bag? And the cognitive load of decision after decision after decision of one little change in the one thing that really made my mornings easy. Decision fatigue is definitely a real thing. It is something that my physical therapists have told me over and over I need to work on. Clearly by this, I'm still trying to figure that out. And so, I then like, on top of that, and I'm, figuring this out day to day, trying something new. And then one day I walk to that elevator. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the elevator. I'm going to just walk a little further and figure it out. And then right next to the elevator is this poster. And this poster has a cartoon gorilla and these really like cheesy collegiate letters like, take the stairs. It's better for your health. It's better for you mentally. Like, just obnoxious. Okay. Insult to injury. And so after a few weeks of this, I took it down. I couldn't stand it anymore. I don't need an ableist society to remind me that they see me as lazy. Also, I wish this had a neat, tidy ending. It doesn't, just spoiler alert. But also, like, I have found that stories about disability generally don't. Of course, the elevator got fixed somewhere here in midsummer. But I think about that poster a lot. Like, it just kind of lives rent free in my brain. And when I think about that, I think it's partly something I am seeing in society of a larger pushback against technology, and that, ultimately recedes back to access. I'm hearing conversations of like, maybe we bring back blue books so that people aren't using AI to like write their essays. In activist spaces, there is a resurgence of zines, and especially print zines, to democratize information and, thinking about avoiding surveillance. I'm seeing more and more critiques of hybrid meetings. This is where I wish I had more hope at the moment, but I become incredibly worried, and I wonder who is going to get left behind and who is going to be impacted and hurt most by these moves. Because these decisions operate on assumptions. That everyone can write, that everyone has money to purchase a physical copy, that people can access spaces where those copies are being held and where those meetings are, where that community is. We're at a moment in this country where disabled people are losing access in so many ways. And so I find myself thinking about how can we avoid contributing to that loss? All of that to round back, though, I have spent about a decade trying to write about my experience with disability. So you think it would not be hard for me to think about how the ADA has impacted me. And again, I think that speaks a little bit to like when we think about access for everyone, sometimes it's integrated and we don't see it. I'm sure for others that elevator was only an inconvenience, and I'm sure for others it was even more disruptive. But I think this is where internalized ableism is sometimes at its most insidious. The blind spots it creates for ourselves and the ways that it lives within us, whether we are turning that on ourselves, whether we are turning that on each other. And so I hope that, as we keep thinking about these things, as we keep having these conversations, that we can really kind of think about those moments of, well, what does this look like on the day to day? How does this impact us? Like, who is going to be most affected? Because I think it can be really easy for us to lose sight of that, especially when it is ourselves. And so that, again, no tidy ending, but thank you very much.
Wow, what a panel, what a panel. Nora Erskindry is our next speaker. She's an associate professor of nursing at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, with an invisible disability, deafness. And her speech is entitled Advocating for Equitable Life Experiences Regardless of Disability.
Thank you, Kathy. And I just learned from this pride flag that white is the symbol for mind. I have hearing loss as a disability, and it's invisible. You can't tell that I'm wearing hearing aids, and have worn those for about 6 or 7 years now. And I had the privilege of being on the Writing the Disability Experience in 2 years ago in 2023 for the 33rd annual Disability Act celebration here on campus, and excited to be here again. And I look back at the comments that I had made a couple years ago, and my focus then was talking more on the connections about disability and shame, because I have felt a lot of shame related to my disability, not being, quote, like everyone else, and I needing to do that, ask for accommodations to make my disability visible, to disclose it, that kind of thing. So I spent some time sharing a couple years ago about the need to increase awareness about the prevalence of hearing loss, because many of us have hearing loss, and I still want to increase awareness of that. It's just not something associated with aging. Children have hearing loss, middle-aged people have hearing loss, people in their 20s and 30s have hearing loss. And so you're not alone if you have a hearing loss, and we all have different ways that we have hearing disabilities. So how my hearing loss came about is what they consider in the medical world an unknown etiology, meaning nobody really knows. We're going to guess why your hearing doesn't work the way it should. I did have a great uncle that was born deaf. And I also was told that because I like to swim in icy cold waters, I was born in Canada up in Georgian Bay, that might have caused bony growths in my ears, and that could also impact my hearing. But I also have either profound to severe sensory neural hearing loss is what you would hear an audiologist tell you about my ears. And I started noticing this probably in my late 30s with a lot of what did you say? Could you say that again? And so the way I view the world changed a lot after I started dealing with my hearing loss. And so I now no longer have that same level of sense of shame with hearing, and I'm more open about discussing my hearing loss journey. And this spring was really impactful for me because I looked for things through our Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing for the state to find out what different resources are being offered. And I was able to complete an online book club from someone that is deaf and hard of hearing named Catherine Rybeck. And she wrote a book called Becoming Hearing Empowered. And so it's coming from the frame of a growth mindset. Let's look positively about what you can do and not think about how the negative things are. So to change that mindset. So in this book club, I networked with other folks across the state because it was online, and I experienced what other people had. There was a lady that had lost her hearing suddenly in her mid 50s due to a car accident, and was anticipating that she would probably lose all of her hearing. So she was trying to learn American Sign Language, just like Ashley's doing for us up there today. We also had American Sign Language interpreters because one of the people in the class was deaf. And it was interesting to see this mix of people that had various levels of hearing loss or not being able to hear at all. I'd also learned of the joy that people have from being able to use technology to hear things again. One gentleman learned of resources that allowed him to talk to family members on the phone in decades. So that feels great to be able to use the ADA to help get these technologies in place. But there's also a lot of pain associated with hearing loss, and expressed through tears of different people on this online book club about the assumptions that we make about other people. The lady that had lost her hearing suddenly in the car accident, most people made the assumption that because she spoke so well, of course she could hear, because why couldn't you hear because you speak so well? And so avoiding making those assumptions became important to me, because it takes more time and more money to experience life with a disability as well. For me, the hearing aids that I require are about $6,000 a pair, because I need the most high-end technology to help discriminate sounds. And that's not really covered very well by health insurance. So I'm an advocate for working with our healthcare system of advocacy at the political level to try to get more cost associated with paying for hearing aids. Because when I'm not wearing my hearing aids, there are very few things that I hear or understand. And teaching here at UW-Eau Claire in the online format, it was a little bit of a challenge to get accommodations, to have other people understand your requests for accommodations, and things as we've talked about. The progress has been wonderful here at the university. I need more time to prepare because I use my cell phone, which connects directly to my hearing aid. So I have to call in. It's nice to have these captions on Zoom, but at the same time, it's also nice for my brain to hear the words as well. And so I dial in on my phone, and my phone talks right into my hearing aids in my ears. In fact, one time my office is close to where I taught in a classroom, and I'd left my phone in the classroom. And then someone called during class, I hadn't silenced my phone, turned off, and my head started ringing. The students were all like, what's going on? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I left my phone too close. So when I have in-person meetings, then I also need to just make it aware that now at our department and college meetings, people are aware of my hearing disability. And so I get closed captionings put up on Zoom. I need to sit about 5 feet away from you if we were in a silent environment, and I need to look at your mouth a little bit more to help with visual cues. So I remind students of being in class, if you see me walking towards you and looking at your mouth, I'm not being weird. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. I hear a lot more things than I want to hear, actually. I say that I hear a lot, but I don't understand a lot. With hearing aids, I can hear the wind blow my hair, which most of us can't hear, but I can't understand what my 5-year-old grandson is saying because his voice is a higher pitch. And so there's give and take with the technology there. And something I wanted to repeat from the last time I was on this panel is just, to be aware of people with hearing just around you. If someone doesn't respond to a question from you, maybe they didn't hear it. For me, I need you to tap me on my shoulder maybe and say, look at me, I'm talking now, or and to try to make sure that I'm paying attention, because I don't want to seem rude or that, you're not worth my time to answer a question, but I may not have understood that you had a question for me. So as I have, as I said, struggled with shame, I've tried to pretend that I did understand a conversation, nodding, smiling, laughing. I read people's faces now more. And so if I sense a joke's coming, and I don't understand the joke, I may laugh anyway, and usually get notes in department meetings, someone wants to pass it on to you, and whispering in my ear. Even with hearing aids, I can't understand what someone is saying if they're whispering. So I started to say, writing on a note, I'm sorry, I don't understand whispering, and calling down the hallways and, just want to greet and wave and say hi to somebody. And I'm just not always understanding what people are shouting down the hallway to me. So I walk up to them and I try not to take that personally. Like, I thought you understood. Can't do that from a distance. So I'm working on also understanding things. So with this book club, becoming more hearing empowered, I found that if I have this growth mindset, this positive thing, hey, this is my world, this is how I communicate. You want to come along and learn with me how I communicate, because I want to communicate with you and I want to be your friend too. So that has helped my mindset, instead of thinking, hey, how come nobody's, understanding that I have hearing loss. So just as a reminder again, we live in a world where there are many people with hearing loss. The World Health Organization, being in the nursing profession, we rely on statistics a lot. So the World Health Organization says we got 466 million people worldwide that have hearing loss. 40 million Americans and about 500,000 Wisconsinites here in our state dealing with that. And some of them may still feel shamed or embarrassed about having that. We don't talk about hearing loss. And 1 in 3 people who need treatment are the ones that seek it. So we're not going to get help for our hearing loss. Again, for me, it was because of shame. I don't want to be, set out as somebody else that's different. And as Kathy Schneider said to me when I shared my hearing loss with her, she was like, well, welcome to the Disability Club. We're all going to get there one day or another, as we get older, as we're there. So why not let people know what you need to know so that you can communicate and advocate. And I believe, we're all body, mind, and spirit in here, in those quality of life that I want to share needs to me to be able to understand more so that I'm not socially isolating, which can lead to depression. There's connections to dementia. There's a lot of health things connected to not being able to hear. So again, advocate for people. Advocate for people at the sort of state level through the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We can get a hold of legislators. We can work on policy development about health insurance, and just realize that we're all in this together to help each other with the different disabilities that we do have, and make life the highest quality of life that we can live. And don't, take for granted the things. Like, I used to take my hearing for granted, and I still have wishful thinking like, oh, maybe it'll come back, but it won't come back. And it's probably going to get worse over time as things go from a logical perspective. And I also lost my sense of smell last year when I had COVID in April. So that's made a new thing about like food doesn't taste the same, and just like to be grateful for the different senses that we do have. And I'm grateful for the technology that the ADA has allowed through that act to make sure that we get the things that we need over time. And I just want to thank you for your attention and your interest in being here today.
We're glad you're in the club, Nora. Our next speaker, Lily Strello, is the university's sustainability coordinator. And her talk is entitled, "The ADA Benefits You Too, Whether You Know It or Not."
Thanks, Kathy. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces in the room. My name is Lily Strelo. I am autistic. I have ADHD and anxiety and depression, a great array of somewhat invisible disabilities. And I was not diagnosed with these developmental and mental health disorders until I was 25. So I'm one of a large group of young women and non-binary and trans folks who have gotten diagnosed as an adult or are may not have the money to get diagnosed, but know that they are neurodivergent. Um, you know, I don't think I was diagnosed with especially autism and ADHD until I was 25, because that research has historically focused on boys and men to the exclusion of everyone else. So when I was able to get official diagnoses, it opened the door to official accommodations and workplace protections because of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I want to highlight, I'm going off script a little bit, but I want to highlight that there's always work to be done, and that implementation of the ADA can be flawed, sometimes systematically. I was informed this morning of a friend who works elsewhere in the UW who delayed their start date due to their chronic illness with their current job and is now being let go because of that start date being later than others folks, even though their contract began earlier than that. And so the reality of relying on the ADA, and also, as you heard some other speakers say, having to trust that it will come through for you, even though it doesn't always work that way, can be really stressful. And especially so with the federal government using executive orders to dismantle diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts in public and private institutions across the nation. States have been attacking us too. Weaponizing these initiatives to further harm marginalized people does more than restrict our ability to participate in democracy and in public life. For many communities, legacy pollution, a lack of clean water and air, and the prioritization of fossil fuel infrastructure leaves lives precarious, sick, and cut short. Disabilities often manifest from poor air quality, like asthma in predominantly Black and Brown communities. Here in Wisconsin, PFAS has become a major concern. PFAS chemicals are also known as forever chemicals. They can cause cancer, and there are many cancer-related disabilities that you can develop from that treatment process. And we may have a $20 million treatment system going in the city of Eau Claire, but we know that our rural neighbors may not be able to afford to test their wells. And if they have PFAS pollution, they probably can't afford to remediate that, which means that this is going to have disproportionate impacts, create more disabilities, and harm our neighbors. these are some examples of how environmental conditions, workplace injury, genetics, age, and everyday accidents can all contribute to creating disabilities at any age. I think another good example is recently long COVID has manifested as an after effect of that infection. And I know in my own life, as my parents age, disability manifests itself through less eyesight and less energy. And I've noticed the presence or lack of physical accessibility features like benches, quality lighting, larger text on menus, and other documents as I've gone out into the world with them as they age. My dad turned 70, I believe, just this summer. So for me, being autistic, the volume of a restaurant can be a really big barrier to social events. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to get a beer with peers and tried to find, the patio or a corner farthest away from the speaker, and then, felt my body start to really go into panic mode because it's so loud and overwhelming in that space. Um, and it's because of the ADA and the accommodations that I have through it that when my body is too sensitive, whether that's to light or sound or simple social interaction, I get to work from home as needed. And I think that without the ADA, I wouldn't be able to have that. And again, I had the financial privilege to get diagnosed officially to pursue the accommodations that I have. And even with that financial security to do so, it took me a year of calling once a month before I got through the wait list and got diagnosed. And let me tell you, trying to do that with ADHD is a pain in the butt. It's not accessible. Our healthcare system, there are many wonderful things about it, but the administrative side, I think, could stand to improve. I wanted to wrap up by sharing a few examples. The American Dis the Am- the ADA protects our right to accessible sidewalks, classrooms, dorm rooms, restrooms, buses, and it now includes digital accessibility as well. And these features benefit more than us up here, and they benefit more than folks who are not currently or yet disabled. The most famous example of this is called the curb cut effect. Curb cuts allow folks with mobility devices to use sidewalks, but they also facilitate safe roadside transit for parents with strollers, delivery workers with carts, travelers with luggage, and all kinds of micro transit devices like skateboards and bikes. Um, and should you become disabled or differently disabled than you already are, you might notice new examples of the curb cut effect. So a couple more for you to think about as you go about the rest of your summer. Subtitles allow for media consumption for deaf and hard of hearing people, but are enjoyed by many, particularly in my generation. There's a lot of us young folks who use subtitles all the time. I love them. Um, Automatic doors allow folks to use mobility devices to enter buildings and bathrooms, as well as catering staff beleaguered with cartloads of supplies, which I've seen many a time on campus. Um, Food ingredient labeling can save lives for folks with severe allergic reactions, but they also save many a digestive tract if you have a more minor minor sensitivity or what is labeled as minor, it might not be in your lived experience. Audiobooks and speech to text are so much part of our cultural zeitgeist now that tech firms, looking at you, Amazon, have attempted to monopolize some of these services. Um, the competition between those firms and the protection from the ADA, I think, has created increased access to nearly every type of media for those who can't read by sight. Um, this could include blind folks as well as folks who maybe did not have access to great education growing up and don't read very well. Um, I also have lots of friends who do audiobooks while they clean, and they really love that. Automatic doors in minivans is now really commonplace, and that was for some disabled people a requirement that they had to get retrofitted in earlier personal vehicles. To this, every time I see students around downtown, especially, I wonder how many phone users don't cross the road until they hear that the walk sign is on to cross instead of actually see it, given that most of them are looking down at their phones. So another little example there. And lastly, better filter quality in HVAC systems and ventilation systems in buildings. It can protect folks with pre-existing conditions like asthma, and it's going to benefit all of us as wildfire season smoke increases and becomes more commonplace in our summers here in the Midwest. Um, our building systems can they can be inaccessible, but if we think about universal design and our the many ways disability manifests, they can become really wonderful spaces that are welcoming for entire communities of people. Um, so all of these examples, many of which started as what was viewed as cumbersome features for one person or a small group of people, showcase the benefits created for all of us through the ADA. And like I mentioned, the subsequent universal design standards in our physical, digital, and social environments create a big impact and a positive impact. I personally rely on the ADA and have benefited from it, and many, if not all of you, also have. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess your name needs to be Lily to be on this panel. Our next speaker, Lily Isel, is a current UW-Eau Claire student and the neurodiversity ambassador for the Neurodiversity Alliance and Student Senate Personnel Director.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lily. Aubrey, I first want to say that I'm glad I'm not the only one that didn't like the poster by the elevator. It also left a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm glad that wasn't just me. I have ADHD as well as arthritis. And I first want to thank the SSD office and all of the staff and Katie Bublitz especially for having me here. And they go beyond the legal requirements that their office holds, but they go above and beyond to help students that they serve. And I, for one, would not be here where I am without their guidance and just unwavering dedication to their students. But I would also like to thank my mom, my dad, and my brother for traveling here from Minnesota and hopefully being my ride back home. My parents have always instilled and reiterated the value of advocacy, both for myself and for others, while my brother, Henry, has always been a reminder that this work is so important, whether it was getting his first paycheck this summer or going to state all 4 years for adapted sports in high school. Henry is living proof that neurodivergent youth can thrive in this world with proper supports for them. Over the last couple of years, I've talked about them a lot at different speaking engagements, but I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to stand in front of them or sit in front of them and thank them directly. And the reason why I'm even able to sit here and speak about my experiences is because of them. And I was diagnosed in 5th grade with ADHD, but my mom knew I had it long before then. Being a child psychologist and having ADHD herself, it was kind of her specialty, so it made sense. And my mom really instilled the value of self-advocacy because while she was in the meetings with our school psychologist and the school counselor, she made sure I was in every single one of those meetings, and she made sure to tell me that I'm not going to be here to hold your hand always through this entire process, and that this is something that you need to take charge of and advocate for yourself in these classrooms. And so because of that, in middle school, I was able to go up to my different teachers and say, "Hi, my name is Lily. I have ADHD. These are the accommodations that I have." But not only my parents, but as well as one of my 6th grade teachers my math teacher was instrumental in helping me understand my accommodations and figure out what accommodations that I wanted, whether it was having earbuds in during class, taking a math test, or going out into the hallway to take the math test. And as a sibling who was not born with all of the math skills, I needed that help in math. And so because of that teacher who made a difference in my accommodations journey, I was able to find what works for me in the classroom. And I not only found that those accommodations, but also unofficial accommodations. So like having a fidget, because this is somehow the only fidget that I brought today, even though I carry them around all the time. Being able to meet with my professors before the semester starts and say, this is how I think I'm going to succeed in your classroom. How can we work together to make sure that I do? Things like body doubling with other people to make sure that I'm keeping myself accountable during tasks, and time blocking in my Outlook calendar that is so meticulously organized that if it's not, I kind of lose it. Um, and so not only is section 504 and the ADA incredibly important for legal reasons, but those teachers and those educators and the role models that I had went above and beyond what section 504 requires and was able to, help me be a better learner and a better student in the classroom, and was probably the reason I was even able to attend college and get through K-12, especially after COVID. Um, but specifically with the title of my piece being "My accommodations are not cheating." First, I looked at that after I submitted it and I thought, okay, that was a little bit harsh and maybe I should change it a little bit. But I came up with that because when I talk to a lot of my friends who are ND, those comments are the reality that many of them face, and that when you hear the word accommodations, a lot of people just assume, oh, it's cheating. Oh, you're getting a leg up on everybody else in the classroom. Why do you get to have that when nobody else does? But it puts us on an equal playing field to everybody else. Going back to my math class, if my brain processes quicker than other people's and I skip over a number, it just makes sense to have that extra time or that time and a half for me to be able to process that quicker. And it's not cheating because giving me time and a half does not magically make the answers appear somewhere in the room for me to cheat off of. If it did, that would be great, but it does not. And testing in a different room doesn't mean that the teacher or the professor is giving me the answers. And I would argue that it's harder to cheat when you're in a room by yourself versus a room of a lot of other people. And the ADA is, and if I'm recording a lecture so I can learn the information and I can go back to it, I personally, and I haven't met anybody else who really would take the time to like sell the recording online of that professor. I don't think anybody is bothering to do that. We just want to learn the material from our class. And while the ADA is a law, it also represents so much more, and it represents a classroom where every student can learn and grow and have the supports that they need. And it represents the educators that provide their students with those personalized supports they need to succeed. And the ADA is a law, but it's also a mindset, and it believes in people of all abilities to thrive in their environments and to make sure that they can get into those environments in the first place. And it acknowledges and celebrates our differences and disabilities. And it represents a need to make our world more accessible, no matter how small of a step it is. And last year we had an author on campus named Emily Ladow, and she shared, I guess, what you could consider a threat, but also, some advice is that unlike other identities, you can become a member of the disability community at any point in your life. So the ADA does and will affect you at some point in your life. And I'm grateful that I've had it in place during my lifetime to help me succeed in the classroom, but also in the workplace and outside of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Sydney Zimmerman, who is a speech, language, and hearing sciences major going into her 4th year. And her talk is entitled Goodwill Wheelchair.
Hi, my name is Sydney, and I have a chronic illness called dysautonomia, which is the dysfunction of my autonomic nervous system. It affects my heart rate, blood pressure, and basically my entire body. I developed it extremely suddenly and unexpectedly in only October of my freshman year here. So I was only 18. I was only 2 months into college. It was a lot. Um, and after a couple of hospital stays, I was forced to drop half of my classes and finish my first semester of college at home. I had no idea if I'd ever come back to UW-Eau Claire in person. But everything changed when my mom found a cheap wheelchair at Goodwill. It was like old, clunky, generic hospital wheelchair, about as basic as they come. And after a lot of discussion, she bought it and I took it for a test run. It was in the middle of winter, of course, for finals week. And my family drove me to campus and dropped me off by Phillips, which is very close to here, to meet with my group for my final project. That was the first time I noticed that even on lower campus, there are huge hills, disregarding the hill. And until my sister had to push me 90% of the way to the library, I never noticed how steep even the little inclines on the campus mall were. My hands and even my pants were full of dirty snow. I was so exhausted, but I was so happy to be back in McIntyre. And I met with my group members in front of a second floor study room. As I was trying to figure out if I wanted to leave my wheelchair inside or outside of the tiny room, someone grabbed my wheelchair. Before I could decide what was best for me, he pushed me inside. That was the first time someone treated me differently for being in my wheelchair. I knew he was trying to be helpful, like a lot of people are, and I laughed it off, but I felt really weird afterwards. And I was with my group for 2 months before I left campus. They knew who I was before I gained my disability, but they treated me differently afterwards. And one thing that I tell people is you wouldn't move someone standing without asking, so why would you push someone's wheelchair? It's not any different. And that moment showed me that accessibility and advocacy are not just automatic doors and ramps. It's so much more than that. And most people won't notice or care about these issues until it affects them too. And like many people have said, you can join the disability community at any time. So it's good if everyone cares about these issues. And now, today, I've been an ambulatory wheelchair user for 3 years now. And this year, I also got my custom wheelchair. It's pink, and her name is Poppy, if anyone's wondering. And it's the best thing ever. And I have continued to advocate for the inaccessible areas of campus, as we know there are still some areas that need help. And the ADA is what allowed me to return to campus in the first place my freshman year. Without the ADA, I wouldn't have been able to bring my wheelchair and be on campus. I would have been stuck at home and I might not have ever come back to college. And my wheelchair and my other accommodations help me to be a full-time student here. And joining the disability community has also taught me so much about other disabilities. And I've even been connected to a lot of new friends, which is so nice. And I've just overall learned so much. And I keep fighting for accessibility. It's given me a passion for advocating and educating people. And hopefully, I'll do that in my future career too, as a speech language pathologist.
Before we adjourn to partying, there's time for a couple questions, and I would ask Audrey to point to you if you raise your hand and want to ask a question or make a comment. No, this crowd just wants to go party.
Nancy.
I have a microphone. Hold on. I can't imagine being in a wheelchair and trying to get through our winter snow. And I don't care if those sidewalks go down, they're usually covered with snow. How do you deal with that?
So I personally have a power assist on my wheelchair, but otherwise because of the hills, it's really inaccessible in the winter. I'm in contact with the SSD office a lot, and we'll let them know if there's snow that didn't get plowed. But it's really hard in the winter. And I've had some people, like my sister goes to school with me here too. And some of my friends will give me a push if I need to, even if my power assist fails because of that ice.
Any other questions? Look like
I don't see it.
No other questions?
no other questions. Okay, it's time to party and celebrate 35 years of the ADA. Thanks for coming.